In this whiteboard lesson, I'm going to talk to you about the approach I used in planning the very last stage of completing my dissertation. And really, this is the stage where you bring it all together. You've done as much parallel working as you possibly can as you've gone through the study. But now, and you really do need to leave a number of months at the end to pull it all together, and there'll be some of those sections that you won't be able to write until you actually get to the end of your study. So hopefully, number one, you haven't left too much to do, and you're not stressing about having to think all the way back to the beginning of your study and bring all of that information through. Hopefully, as you've gone through your study and as you'll have learned from the other lesson, you'll have been adding into that final report as you go. So let's say you plan for maybe 6 months to really bring it all together, edit it, finish off the final sections. How do you approach that planning process? So what I did was I gave myself 6 months, and I just got a plan of 6 months, and let's say from 1 to 6, and then I mapped out from day 1 to day 30 or 31 or whatever it was for each of those 6 months. And I then took each section of my final report, and a key theme throughout this whole course is to think in the building blocks of your dissertation. And I said to myself, okay, well, and let's say this is from January to June. So 6 months, you're going to give yourself, and you agree with your supervisors up front over here about this plan so that they are happy with it, and they agree that at the end of that 6 months, possibly you are going to be able to submit that final report to the external examiners. And remember that by that stage, your examiners will be happy to submit it. So the end of your plan can't be just for you to have finished your final report. It must be for you and your supervisors to get the document to a sufficient level of quality that it can be submitted to external examiners. So what I did was I said, okay, let's say in month 1, I'm going to work on my introduction. And I blocked out the first month there to work on my introduction. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I planned out what I needed to do to complete my introduction right up front there. Then in month 2, I had done quite a lot of my literature review already. So I didn't need as much time to work on my literature review. And so let's say I gave myself 2 weeks to wrap up the literature review and pull it all together properly. And I felt the same about my methodology. But what I do teach you in this course is the importance of philosophical positioning before you dive into describing the techniques and methods of your research process. And that was one thing that I had to spend a bit more extra time on, and which you may also have to do as well in your methodology section. So I gave myself 2 weeks there to work on my method. So section 1, section 2, section 3, month 1, month 2. Then, and this is just illustrative, but you need to apply the same thinking. Then the third, 1, 2, 3, fourth section of your final report is going to be your results. So I hadn't done too much work on my results because I was still doing the analysis. So I gave myself 6 weeks. So there's 4 weeks in month 3 and 2 weeks of month 4 to do my results section. And another technique that I teach you in another course is to send your supervisors a weekly update, which is just good practice all the way through your whole study. Let them know exactly what you've been doing the previous week and what you're going to do the next week. And what I did was, as I was able to share with them sections or subsections from each of these, I made sure that they saw those building up as I went through this plan. And really, this was a 6-month plan that we agreed to and that they knew that I was working on, so they were expecting these updates to come through every week. Then I knew that I had to spend probably a good, let's say, 2 weeks writing up the discussion and the conclusion. It might be more, it might be less, for you. Okay, so now I've got my 5 sections that I've planned out over the first 4 months of this 6-month plan. Now what's very important is that you plan in enough time for your supervisors to review your final report or dissertation. And I gave my supervisors, I think it was initially 4 weeks, so full month. So if this was January, February, March, April, May was entirely dedicated to giving my supervisors time to review the work that I had done. And then and they knew that they would have that time up here in January. So they could plan, and I asked them whether it would be convenient for them to spend some time in May reviewing my final report. Also, given that they had been receiving some of it as they go, but I wasn't relying on them to review it because they're busy and you have to respect your supervisor's time and you have to manage their time as much as you have to manage your time. But with 4 months' notice, I then expected them to put sufficient time in during the month of May to review my whole final report. And I had 3 supervisors, so I needed to coordinate quite well between all 3 of them. Then I gave myself 2 weeks in the beginning of the 6th month to collate and update this document again based on the supervisor review here. Then I gave them another week to review for a second time, because now you can imagine I've had 3 different supervisors giving me feedback on different sections. I've got to make sense of all of those, and in many cases some of the feedback was contradictory. So which feedback do I incorporate and which don't I incorporate? Ultimately it's your document, but very important also that you keep a track of all the changes that you make to your document as you go through, so that they can see exactly which feedback you did or didn't incorporate. And then once they had reviewed it for a second time, that then was a major milestone for us, because we all knew that I had spent 4 months pulling it together, given them 4 weeks to review it, spent 2 weeks to update it based on their feedback, given them another week just to double check it was okay, and then myself 1 last week to pull it all together and make sure that the grammar was perfect, the editing was perfect, and it's little things like, did you refer to Appendix B? And then you added in another Appendix B, so that appendix that you actually referred to is now Appendix C, for example. And if you've added in referencing throughout your document, it'll take care of it automatically. Have all your figures updated. If you added in a figure, did it renumber all those figures? So go and check your front matter and your back matter to make sure that all those indices still pull together perfectly. So I would really leave a lot of that grammatical and referential detail till a little bit later on, and don't obstruct your content creation process up here, but equally don't leave too much of that to do at the end. So once we'd been through 2 sets of reviews and I had then a final week to pull it all together, we were then able to send it off to the external examiners. And remember, your supervisors will be lining up external examiners in the meantime, so that once it's ready, it can then go off to the external examiners. And once that happens, you're not going to hear much for a good couple of months until you get your examiner's report on your document. And maybe just to touch on that very quickly, that's going to take one of three results. Either it's a pass and there's corrections that the external examiner wants to see again, and those corrections are significant enough that their pass is dependent on being certain that you've made those corrections. Or there's a pass that they will be happy for you to send those updates to your supervisors, and they don't need to see those changes again. They delegate that responsibility to your supervisors to sign off that you've made the changes to your final report to your supervisor's satisfaction. Or thirdly, unfortunately, it's a fail without any chance of remediating your document. So it's beyond corrections, and you could appeal this with your institution, and I'm sure that there are other variations on these three outcomes, but you really want to aim for the situation where you pass with some hopefully minor corrections that are going to go back to your supervisors. So in this whiteboard lesson, we've covered a 6-month planning process, or at least an approach to planning for 6 months to do a final wrap-up and completion of your dissertation so that you can get it off to the external examiners in the best possible shape to hopefully get the best possible result.